You've got to see this. This is a historical event where President Trump is speaking in Saudi Arabia to over 50 Muslim and Arab nation leaders. It's a powerful, powerful event. They also give us $400 billion in investing in jobs and military equipment. They're wanting to be able to fight radical Islam and the things that are taking place across the world. They're wanting to partner with the world to make a difference. Our president is leading the charge. This is so exciting. As a matter of fact, check it out. The first foreign trip of our president, President Trump, is he is bringing in the new vision, the new narrative for the world, for America.
It's exciting.
Yeah, and the things that he said is coming to pass. And his first trip, international trip, is to Saudi Arabia. As a matter of fact, take a look now. This is so important. You know, we have a president that's saying, I'm ready to facilitate our vision, to no longer be the policeman of the world,
That's
but
right.
to empower others and back them to fight their own battles. And today's going to be all about that. As a matter of fact, we got so much packed in today's program. It's just so many answers to prayer. But I think about this before. We're thinking about Saudi Arabia. We want to think about 1945, which was the first time that this actually happened.
Yes.
It happened on the USS Quincy with President FDR, right? Franklin Roosevelt.
FDR.
As a matter of fact, take a look at this. Is Franklin Delano Roosevelt on the USS Quincy. And John, tell us a little bit about that, what took place there.
Well, as we know, Saudi Arabia is President Donald Trump's first stop on his international trip as the leader of the United States, a fact that highlights the importance that he attributes to the U.S. and Saudi relationship. President Trump's meeting with King Salman, and it makes him the 7th U.S. president, Greg, to have traveled to the Middle East to meet with the Saudi king since World War II.
Wow.
Pretty exciting.
Yes, it is.
Pretty exciting. The first meeting came, as you mentioned earlier, in 1945, when President Franklin Roosevelt invited King Saud, the king's father, to join him aboard the USS Quincy. And what's interesting about this is that President Roosevelt was on his way home from the Yalta Conference, where he, Prime Minister Winston Churchill, and the Soviet Premier Joseph Stalin had discussed the future of post-war Europe. President Roosevelt requested the meeting with King Saud because he recognized the strategic importance of Saudi Arabia to the future in the global economy back in 1945.
Right.
And here we are in the 20th century, still talking about Saudi Arabia.
And this is the father of the present day
of King Salman right now, right.
Isn't that cool? So here
Amazing.
we are. It's from Eisenhower to Trump.
Yes.
And we'll be talking more about
Yes.
that. You got to stay with us the whole time because we're going to be talking about the entire international trip all the way from Saudi Arabia to Israel to Rome.
Yes.
And this is so important because you're looking at the world coming together to end terrorism, to come together to end them. I think about the partnership for America and Saudi Arabia now has been over 75 years, as you were talking about. As a matter of fact, let's just take a look back at what the State Department is saying about that relationship. This is so important when you think about our relationship over 75 years. And there's one thing that President Trump said. He said, we're going to rebuild our relationships, our partnerships that we had over the years. But the population of Saudi Arabia, John, what's it?
It's about 33 million.
So 33 million. So when we're talking about Saudi Arabia, we're talking about 33 million folks.
Yeah, and oftentimes it's important to underscore and highlight that this is a relationship that spans 75 years. Today you talk about the Middle East and everyone gets concerned and get worried, but it's a friendship. It's a relationship that we've had over these last years.
At least some common interest to be able to deal with terrorism that's going on.
Absolutely.
And it's the opposite of what a prior president was even, they were basically, according to the prince that was on Fox News, he said that that we wanted to participate, we wanted to go out and fight with America to defeat radical Islam or the radical extremists, and he said that they wouldn't let us.
Yeah, well, there's obviously a divide amongst the Muslim community and religion between the Shia and the Sunni, and so President Trump is actually picking sides, if you will.
Right. So population is right around 33 million, and out of that population, John, it's 70% of them, according to one of the princes, I believe, is under 30 years of age.
That's amazing.
Yes. What is the population that works? Are the ones that actually have a job?
Reportedly 8 million. 8 million of the Saudis actually work.
Out of 33 million.
8 million.
8 million are working, and also with
so the rest of them are receiving
70% being under 30 years old, so they're actually receiving state
subsidized. I mean, I think their gasoline is like 4 cents a gallon or something like that.
Yeah. And when some of the reports are every time there's an uprising or something going on, they just write more checks.
They give them more stuff, absolutely.
Yeah, here's $6,000, here's $10,000, and they buy more technical stuff. But the thing about it is, you're looking at, they're talking about the Project 230 or something like that they're wanting to change their culture. So no telling what's going to take place. But I know that when they were together, they signed, President Trump and King Salman signed a deal. You remember the deal they were signing?
$110 billion arms deal.
Tell us about that.
Well, this deal basically states here that the president's underscored this deep, long-standing commitment of the United States to the security and the stability and the prosperity of Saudi Arabia. And they demonstrated this, the president demonstrated his confidence in the future of this relationship. He also emphasized the importance of working jointly to address the challenges to the regional peace and security in defeating ISIS. And according to President Trump and King Salman signed this joint strategic vision statement promising to close collaboration to counter violent extremists and to disrupt the financing of terrorism and advance the defense cooperation. So this was a $110 billion deal that was just signed.
So they're signing that right here.
Oh yeah,
so we're not giving them money. The previous administration wrote checks, $100 million on pallets, I believe it was, something like that being delivered. We're actually selling them materials that they can fight their own battles. And they're wanting to fight their own battles. They're wanting to deal with the adversary. Listen, when we get back from this break, we're going to be looking directly at the president's speech. When he gave a speech right there, it's so exciting because he walked right into the face of what people just ignored or judged or criticized, but he just spoke truth. He spoke truth to power. Over 50 Muslim and Arab nations came together to hear him, and he did not fold up. I mean, he just came in there and just
said it like it
delivered it, and we're going to break it down for you, and we're going to go over it. As a matter of fact, we're going to go over it until we cover it all, because you're going to be so encouraged and so confident that we have a leader that's truly doing what they said they're going to do. But join us after this break. Remember, this is in the presence of 50 Arab Muslim nations where he is speaking truth. As a matter of fact, he's repeating right now the beginning of his speech of what he said in his inaugural speech. He's letting them know this is exactly what I said at my inauguration, and this is what I'm doing right now. Let's take a look.
In my inaugural address to the American people, I pledged to strengthen America's oldest friendships and to build new partnerships in pursuit of peace. I also promised that America will not seek to impose our way of life on others, but to outstretch our hands in the spirit of cooperation and trust. Our vision is one of peace, security, and prosperity in this region and all throughout the world. Our goal is a coalition of nations who share the aim of stamping out extremism and providing our children a hopeful future that does honor to God.
This is so important. You think about it, he's in the presence of 50, I mean, there's only 33 Muslim nations part of the Arab League, right, of nations. So you're looking at 50 Arab and Muslim nations that he's speaking this truth to. And he's speaking at a slower pace because he has translators that are translating what he's saying right there. But he's saying specifically, you know, we want to build these relationships, you know, these former friendships, we want to strengthen them again, build new, pursue new relationships with people who have the same values of dealing with this radical extremism that just took place, you know?
The last 8 years have been so divided and so polarized. The president now is able to come into the Middle East and be able to cast a new vision for his administration. But you know, also during this time, he additionally to the $110 billion agreement, the Saudi Arabia Kingdom is investing $400 billion in American jobs.
What was the thing about this too? I know you introduced that part of the speech, but people were saying, I don't know what President Trump's vision is. Well, he said right then, our vision is one of peace, security, and prosperity. I mean, think about that. He just said that. And in this region and all around the world. And he looks at everybody and says, you don't mind getting rich, do you? I mean, that's what he's telling everybody. That's his vision. His vision is peace, security, and prosperity. I want to make sure because a lot of times we'd look over that and say, that's the vision right there. It sounds pretty good.
Beautiful.
Right. Okay. So he is speaking, you said, about the $400 billion investment in Saudi Arabia?
Saudi Arabia is investing $400 billion into America to create thousands more jobs. This is an additional amount to the $110 billion that was invested into the arms.
And so we're going to have jobs.
We're going to have jobs,
of their money.
Absolutely.
That's our gas money that we've been sending over there.
We're now send it back. Bring it back.
Isn't that what he said? He said that we're going to get people to invest in us.
Which is great.
People said that was impossible, but they're writing a $400 billion.
Absolutely.
That's exciting.
Very exciting.
Let's go there now.
Yesterday, we signed historic agreements with the kingdom that will invest almost $400 billion in our two countries and create many hundreds of thousands of jobs in America and Saudi Arabia.
So you look at that, so you think about that somebody says, where is this money going to come from? And he was saying, we're going to get people to invest. And people say, well, who's going to invest? Well, there's Saudi Arabia, the one that was ignored for the last 8 years, saying that we're going to invest $400 billion, jobs for themselves, which they need because a very small portion of their people actually work, but they're wanting to move towards technology. They even had not a Twitter event, but I forget what it's called, but it's called
the social media
social media thing where they're saying we want to move into this technology.
Well, they're going to need to because oil now is trading well below $100 a barrel.
Right.
So they've lost a significant amount of money. So they're looking at different ways to invest and to partner with America. They have to.
So then that's a $400 billion investment into jobs for America.
Absolutely.
And Saudi Arabia, which is only 33 million. We have a couple more million than that.
Yeah.
That's very exciting. As a matter of fact, here's the president right now, and he's talking about it's time to deal with this radical extremism, this ideology. Remember, he's saying this in the presence of many people who others have said they're the ones that are doing this, and you're seeing they're for ending this radical extremism of terrorism taking place in the world, at least the majority of them. Take a look.
Later today, we will make history again with the opening of the new Global Center for Combating Extremist Ideology, located right here in this central part of the Islamic world. This groundbreaking new center represents a clear declaration that Muslim-majority countries must take the lead in combating radicalization.
That's so important because he's saying, listen, I'm telling you the battle that you're about to fight. I am so behind you in this fight. I'm here to tell you that you're fixing to fight it.
That's right.
And you're going to take some of your money and you're going to give it to us, and we're going to give you some guns and stuff so you can fight this battle against it. That's what he's saying.
And you can pay for it.
Yeah, you can pay for it.
We're not going to pay to defend you. You're going to pay for your own defense.
That's what he said he's going to do.
I love it.
But the thing about it is we're finding out that the Saudi people were ready to do it.
Yeah.
The royal family, they were ready to do it, but the previous president would not allow them to get involved in dealing with it because you're a Sunni and Shiite, and we'll talk about that right now. But also, you have right here about dealing with America as a sovereign nation. He doesn't apologize for protecting the security of America. He didn't just say that behind a safe podium at Congress or in a political trail. He's president now, and he goes right in the heart of Islam, but it's, you know, it's Sunni Islam, which is not the radical Iranian Shiite Twelvers, so it's a long story. And they're saying they want to participate, but he said the truth even there. He spoke truth to them. He says, listen, I'm going to take care of America. I'm concerned. My job basically is to take care of America.
Isn't that refreshing?
We said that for like 8 years, right? The president's job is not to, as a matter of fact,
defend the world, but to defend the United States of America.
Well, no, we had the previous president said that I consider it my job to defend every negative stereotype of Islam, no matter where it's found in the world.
Well, speaking about that, that's the deep contrast that existed between both of these administrations' first visit. President Obama's first foreign visit was basically essentially an apology tour and a defense of Islam. Where President Trump is basically stating the facts, saying, well, we're protecting America, America first.
Totally bipolar opposite. And I really believe, I think you think about Haman, right? And Haman's noose that he was setting up to be able to kill all the Jews. And he built this whole contraption, and it ends up that he gets hung on his own thing. And you think about it, for 8 years, something was being built, and they assumed that it was going to go in the hands of someone else, but God had other plans in store, and put a President Trump who comes right in the middle of that and says, shift. And now all the stuff that's been built is being used now to defend Israel and defend America. As a matter of fact, listen to him stand up bold. And remember, he's in the presence of 50 Arab and Muslim nations speaking to their leaders. So he's representing you well. Take a look.
America is a sovereign nation, and our first priority is always the safety and security of our citizens. We are not here to lecture. We are not here to tell other people how to live, what to do, who to be, or how to worship. Instead, we are here to offer partnership based on shared interests and values to pursue a better future for all of us.
That's so important. I mean, what's so cool is that he's talking the way we as believers should be talking, that God loves humanity.
That's right.
He loves all of us, and that, you know, our job is to do what's right. And you can, you know, but I'm not here as a preacher. I'm here as the President of the United States. And it's our job as the church to go in and to evangelize.
Share.
I mean, speaking truth to power. He wasn't just doing it on the campaign trail. He wasn't just doing it in Congress. I wish Congress had this kind of boldness and confidence. But here he comes right there in the presence again. Remember, 50 Arab nations and Muslim nations coming together, and he's saying, listen, this is the beginning of the end those who participate in terror. As a matter of fact, take a look.
Young Muslim boys and girls should be able to grow up free from fear, safe from violence, and innocent of hatred. With God's help, this summit will mark the beginning of the end for those who practice terror and spread its vile creed. At the same time, we pray this special gathering may someday be remembered as the beginning of peace in the Middle East, and maybe even all over the world. But this future can only be achieved through defeating terrorism and the ideology that drives it.
Get this now. He's not talking to Congress. He's not talking to people that are in a political sphere. He's not talking to his local community. He's not talking to New Yorkers. He's talking to the Middle East. He's talking to Islamic nations and Arab nations. And he's saying, listen, the future can only be, this future that he's talking about, beginning of the end, can only be achieved through defeating terrorism and the ideology, which is radical Islamic terrorism, that drives this thing. And that's so exciting because, and they're saying, they're backing this thing up with $400 billion, and they have a war room and stuff they developed, and it's like, this is, you know, so many people are playing politics why God is shifting the world, and we need to participate and support our president in the midst of something like that. What else was in the speech?
In the midst of the speech, he begins to talk about the plight of America and the attacks, the barbaric attacks that have occurred starting from 9/11 all the way to San Bernardino. And he says this in front of these leaders. This is amazing. I want you to watch this.
America has suffered repeated barbaric attacks, from the atrocities of September 11th to the devastation of the Boston bombings, to the horrible killings in San Bernardino and Orlando. The nations of Europe have also endured unspeakable horror So too have the nations of Africa and South America. India, Russia, China, and Australia have all been victims. But in sheer numbers, the deadliest toll has been exacted on the innocent people of Arab, Muslim, and Middle Eastern nations. They have borne the brunt of the killings and the worst of the destruction in this wave of fanatical violence. Some estimates hold that more than 95% of the victims of terrorism are themselves Muslim. We now face a humanitarian and security disaster in this region that is spreading across the planet. It is a tragedy of epic proportions. No description of the suffering and depravity can begin to capture its full measure. This region should not be a place from which refugees flee, but to which newcomers flock.
Oh, this is so important because he's saying, listen, we need to, a whole new narrative needs to be placed over this entire area and region. And he's saying, he's setting the agenda down, talking about, listen, 90% of the victims are Arab, or actually Muslims. And of course, everybody wants to stop the violence, including the Muslims who are not part of the radical extremist Shiite type views that's going on. And they put $400 billion behind it.
Plus another $110 billion. So we got, you know, half a trillion dollars.
And they're purchasing American products, defensive weapons, to be able to defeat radical Islam. And this is just a huge shift. This was not the enemy's plan. The enemy's plan was to destroy Israel, destroy America as we know it. But you're seeing mercy come in.
And keep polarizing the Middle East. I mean, let's not forget that he also, I believe, spoke with the president of Egypt. And there was a previous administration that was orchestrated that change.
He withheld,
but it's huge. So what's happening is a new vision's being casted for the Middle East.
Right.
And it's basically speaking truth to power, letting them know that all this atrocity and all these barbaric, terrorist attacks have to come to an end. And you're going to have to start paying for your own defense.
And we've been seeing this, we've been showing you what's happening in the streets where people are being chased down at bus stations and stabbed, people that were stopped at red lights.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody's running around trying to stab them, while the Palestinian leader, Hamas, pays people to do that, pays the family of the suicide victims. It's in their law. Makes statues in honoring those people who do that. And they're saying, we're going to stop this. And that's really stopping the mindset of Hamas and the Palestinian people, what they're doing there. Well, that's why you're seeing some uprisings in some other areas. But think about this. Imagine the place being shifted to no longer being a place of violence, but a place that people want to come again. People used to always want to come and see the pyramids in Israel and different things like that. Well, listen,
in
Egypt. But think about what now is taking place. Listen to what the president said. Let's turn it back to a place like that. Take a look.
There can be no coexistence with this violence. There can be no tolerating it, no accepting it, no excusing it, and no ignoring.
Well, you think about it, there's just no ignoring. We was talking about. We just missed that last one that I was just talking about. But there's no coexistence with violence, and that's so important because it seems like when we came from the last 8 years, it's like we took that and we could take another one, is what our leader previously said, and it's just like, what's going to coexist with radical Islam? As a matter of fact, let's bring the Muslim Brotherhood on our
front stage
on American Homeland Security and have them advise us on DHS, Department of Homeland. I mean, that's what we're doing.
That's exactly what we're doing.
And he's saying it cannot coexist, and that's so important because it can. I mean, how can it coexist? You know, how can the one who wants to kill you and the one who wants to bring you life coexist together? They're bipolar opposites.
Yeah. He continues to share in this next part of the speech where he says terrorists do not worship God; they worship death.
Oh, yeah.
And so this is, I mean,
he nails it. As a matter of fact, take a look at this. Take a look.
Terrorists do not worship God. They worship death.
That's so important because there need to be a division between the radical Islamists, the ones who are extremists and that are killing folks.
Which reportedly are 15% of all Muslims. About 200 million are radicalized.
Right. And so now you're getting a measure where our president goes right there and says, this is how it really is. This is true doctrine, if you would.
But
they agree with it.
Yes, but this didn't occur the last 8 years.
But you haven't heard people say that they wouldn't agree with it. They're saying that all Muslims are this, and it's like, no, you're actually seeing some that would stand up and say, we're for ending this. 90% of the victims according to what the president's saying, are Muslims.
Yeah.
And they're wanting to stand up. You know, you're not Muslim enough, or you're not Muslim, or this type of thing. And so 90% of those victims, and we've seen some pretty tragic things that we had to show you on VFNtv, and our president's standing up for that. And he's talking about right here, he says, the next thing he's going to be talking about is that if we don't stand up in uniform and uniformly and condemn this, and it's important, not just have one person
Sure.
in a press room making a statement and then going back to play golf. I mean, you got to actually come into agreement, and they are. As a matter of fact, listen to what he said.
If we do not stand in uniform condemnation of this killing, then not only will we be judged by our people, not only will we be judged by history, but we will be judged by God. This is not a battle between different faiths, different sects, or different civilizations. This is a battle between barbaric criminals who seek to obliterate human life and decent people, all in the name of religion. People that want to protect life and want to protect their religion. This is a battle between good and evil.
I mean, he nails it. He said, listen, that you're going to be condemned by God for taking another person's life like that.
That's
and
amazing.
I mean, what if the church preached like that? You know, I mean, he's not a preacher, obviously, he's a president, but he's speaking truth, and they're receiving the truth, and they're writing a check for $400 billion plus another $110 billion and investing. So they've been, this last administration put a narrative out that was not true about what was taking place.
A lot has been said about this president's administration's first 100 days, and I have to say that
this is huge.
That this speech and what he had to say and this agenda that he's laying out in the Middle East is truly historic, and I think it's going to set the agenda for the next 3, 4, maybe 8 years.
Oh, yes.
And we need the stability in the region. I mean, we really need it, because the church needs to be about the Father's business. Once we have stability,
you handle that,
we can handle the other
function. As a matter of fact, when we get back from this break, you're going to hear the president talk right up front and say, listen, you can't wait. The Middle East cannot wait for America to do this. You're going to have to do it. In other words, he's saying, listen, this is your war.
You're going to have to fight and pay for it.
Yeah, it's awesome. As a matter of fact, join us after the break. President Trump in Saudi Arabia giving this beautiful vision-setting speech and how to deal with terrorism, how to unite over a common value of dealing with radical Islam or terror.
Yeah.
And he says specifically here, you're going to hear him talk specifically about saying, you can't wait for America. Don't wait for us. Don't be looking our way. You're going to have to make a choice for your future. You have 2 futures, and you're going to have to make a choice. And he's talking to 50 Arab Muslim nations at a huge gathering who wanted to hear what's the vision for the world from the world's power. Take a look.
But the nations of the Middle East cannot wait for American power to crush this enemy for them. The nations of the Middle East will have to decide what kind of future they want for themselves, for their country, and frankly, for their families and for their children. It's a choice between 2 futures, and it is a choice America cannot make for you. A better future is only possible if your nations drive out the terrorists and drive out the extremists. Drive them out. Drive them out of your places of worship. Drive them out of your communities. Drive them out of your holy land. And drive them out of this earth. For our part, America is committed to adjusting our strategies to meet evolving threats and new facts. We will discard those strategies that have not worked and will apply new approaches informed by experience, talent, and judgment. We are adopting a principled realism rooted in common values, shared interests, and common sense. Our friends will never question our support, and our enemies will never doubt our determination.
This is so important. That's why we're breaking this thing down. You know, make sure you join us in our next program. There's so much more that's going to be happening. But listen to what he just said. He just said, you have a choice to make. You have 2 futures that you could choose from. It's for your kids and your future. Don't wait for America. Since I've been running for office, I've been saying we're not going to fight your wars. You're going to pay for your own wars and fight your own wars. Now, Saudi Arabia, according to the reports of some of the princes that was on Fox News, they said we've been trying to fight it, but previous president wouldn't let us do it. They wanted to be able to fund and help. As a matter of fact, we saw specifically when they showed up, when Syria began to do what they were doing, and they all came to our former president and said, listen, we will pay for the war if you'll just do it. And he passed, the former president, President Barack Obama, passed it off to Putin. Remember, he passed the all the Arab leagues came together.
22 nations, North Africa.
They said the same thing that you're seeing said now by Saudi Arabia, and he just turned it off to Putin at that particular point. He passed it, we had a program, we talked about that. And so now you're looking, he's saying, listen, drive them out. He's talking to the people who have real authority to go in these places that are hurting their own folks. Drive them out of their places of worship, drive them out of your communities, drive them out of the Holy Land, drive them out of the earth. And he's not talking about Muslims, he's talking about these radical extremists that are doing this terror in the earth. It's just tragic, but yet you're seeing a leader come in and say, we're going to do something about it, but you're going to do it, you're going to pay for it, and we're going to have the power, strength of America behind your efforts and what you're doing. That's exciting. It really is, because you wondered when you were hearing the campaign verbiage and you know all the doubt that was being put by media because it's so against this thing, and you're saying, well, this is how it's going to work. He's just going to show up, dance around with the swords, and he said, you don't mind if we balance out our deficit on you right here because you owe us money.
That's right.
And it's happening right there in the press. He walked into all of that as a vulnerable man, because you'll find out in the next program he had swords all around him, and the Lord obviously is protecting our president because the Secret Service couldn't have protected him from those things. From the sword that's going on. As a matter of fact, what happened?
Well, the next thing he talks about in his speech, he says that, you know, every nation, every Muslim nation is going to have to take on this burden. They're going to have to be involved and be engaged. And it kind of underscores what he said in his previous statement. I want you to watch this and see what he had to say.
Above all, America seeks peace, not war. Muslim nations must be willing to take on the burden if we are going to defeat terrorism and send its wicked ideology into oblivion.
Wicked ideology into oblivion. I mean, that is like...
I love that language. That's Winston Churchill-esque, isn't it?
Yes, is it not? And as a matter of fact, if you go in the Oval Office now, you have over his left shoulder is Winston Churchill, and over his right shoulder is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And that's just an amazing stance that's happening right there. We're talking about President Trump. Make sure you join us in our next program, because we are going to continue on. There's so many things that was said, and people say, well, it's just a speech. Everything is a speech. You think about Scripture when you're reading the Word of God. That was spoken, and then it was written.
Yeah.
And so, and even God, I'm not saying that he's a preacher, I'm just saying the spoken word is so important that even the gospel is understood by those who actually say it. And when a president, when the most powerful nation in the world, makes a statement like this, it shifts things.
Well, policies come as a result of this. You know, strategies come as a result of this, and things do shift. So he's setting the agendas.
Well, Saudi Arabia is totally shift. Within 30 days, they built this entire. We'll talk about it in our next program. They built an entire defensive system to come against this radical extremist effort. In 30 days, they built it. And I know that his daughter Ivanka was saying, we want to probably hire those people who built all this within a 30-day period. And you're looking at, like they said, over 70% of the population there is under 30 years old. And
only 8 million are employed. So.
Right, but they have technology, so they're connected to the world. They're connected to what's going on. And you saw how they welcomed our president. You got to see this right here. This is the president's limousine coming in right now, and he's surrounded by the Royal Guard, like the SEAL Team 6 for us. You know, these are like the leading folks right here. You can see it right here. It's coming up on the screen. But they're carrying the American flag surrounding the limousine for our president. Isn't this amazing when you're looking at our president being welcomed by Saudi Arabia? Their greatest military leaders are riding on these horses with carrying American flags. Every other one's an American flag they're saying, we're for you, we're with you in this, and they're united in the effort of ending radical Islamic terrorism.
Beautiful.
I mean, we couldn't ask for more than that.
Well, he was received with royal treatment when he came in, red carpet and all.
He really was. And as a matter of fact, make sure you join us in our next program, because we are going to go into detail. There's so many things that happen there. Policies are going to be set by this. The Middle East is shifting by this. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will be coming also during this week. Very excited about it.
Yes.
I mean, things are shifting, and many are the plans in a man's heart, but it's God's plans that prevail. We've been talking about his speech on the previous program. Powerful policies are going to come out of this. $400 million is being invested by Saudi Arabia into jobs. $400 billion worth of money is being invested in jobs for America and for Saudi Arabia, which they're only 33 million folks right here. And also $110 billion is being used to purchase military equipment to be able to fight their own battles. If you missed our last program, you got to get it. Our president is setting the agenda saying, don't wait for America. You need to fight this battle. We need to fight it together, but you need to fight your own battle. But I want to take you back and remind you what happened in the early part of the President Trump's administration when Prince Faisal, he's the advisor to the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, came on Fox News, and he told us the reality of what's going on. What we found out in his interview, and you'll hear, is the fact that Saudi Arabia has been wanting to help all along. They've been wanting to participate. They've been wanting to help end terrorism and fight the fight. But they said that President Obama would not let Saudi Arabia come in. Well, listen, if you call our last program, President Trump said, not only get in, fight the fight, fund your own fight, we'll give you the equipment, but you're even going to have to buy that equipment. But let's go back and remember the interview with Prince Faisal, the advisor to the Crown Prince, as he's saying how things really are in regards to Saudi Arabia and America. Take a look.
Prince Mohammed was very keen to come meet President Trump as early as possible to re-emphasize the importance of the relationship between the two countries and to reinvigorate the strategic long-standing partnership that we've had. We've been partners and allies for 50 years. We've worked very well together. Saudi Arabia has been a stable and reliable partner for the United States for that time. And I think Prince Mohammed was keen to make sure that we can move into the 21st century together in a very positive and mutually beneficial way.
As you know, candidate Trump did not shy away from saying what had to be done with Gulf states, especially paying their fair share for protection or going after ISIS, something he reiterated after getting elected. Here he was in December talking about it.
When I look at what's going on in Syria, it's so sad. It's so sad. And we've got to help people. And we have the Gulf states. They have nothing but money. We don't have money. We owe $20 trillion. I will get the Gulf states to give us lots of money, and we'll build and help build safe zones in Syria so people can have a chance.
So what about that? Safe zones in Syria and you all helping to pay the bill?
Yeah, well, I mean, Saudi Arabia has always been keen to play its role in the region and in partnership with the US. So I think we are more than ready to cooperate with the United States on countering ISIS in Syria, in Iraq, across the region, not just financially, but the Saudi government offered in the Obama administration's time to send its troops into Syria to fight ISIS. That was not met with enthusiasm by the Obama administration. I think that offer remains on the table, and I'm sure the Saudi government is more than ready to support the US in eradicating ISIS. But as I said, not just financially, but actually with its own troops and with its own people.
So you're about to see, there they are, they're setting the agenda. They said, this is what we want to do. And that's why you see the president that's in Saudi Arabia saying, we're working with the Crown Prince. We're working with them funding. And you heard what the president said. President Trump said, we will get them, they have lots of money, we'll get them to pay for what's going on. Well, we just had in our last program, they're investing $400 billion into America and Saudi Arabia's economy for jobs, $110 billion, I believe, in regards to purchasing military equipment so they can fight their own battle. Exactly what President Trump said he was going to do is exactly what he did, and the Saudi people are saying we want to be able to do that. But before we go into President Trump's speech, I want you to understand the tensions between Saudi Arabia and Iran. When you think about Islam or you think about Muslims, you have the Sunni Muslims, which are the Muslims who are in Saudi Arabia, but then you have the Shia Muslims who are in Iran. They believe differently. There's a smaller number of the Shiite Muslims. The previous administration, President Trump was partnering up and funding Obama. The previous administration, President Obama was funding the Shia Muslims in Iran and nuclear capabilities and pallets of money. But these are radical views of what they want to do to the world, and the Sunni. As a matter of fact, listen to the explanation of the tensions between the two.
Saudi Arabia and Iran have what can lightly be described as a tense relationship. The two majority Islamic countries are geographically separated by only a few miles of Persian Gulf. But ideologically, politically, and culturally, the gap is much wider. Currently, the two are engaged in a proxy war in Yemen, with both sides recruiting allies in order to influence Middle Eastern affairs. So why do Saudi Arabia and Iran hate each other? Well, back in 1929, the future looked bright for the two nations. They'd signed the Saudi-Iranian Friendship Treaty, and diplomatic relations were on the rise. However, sometime in the 60s, the conservative nature of Saudi Arabia ruffled feathers in the modernizing Iran. Anecdotally, Iran's king or Shah was said to have reached out to Saudi Arabia's king saying, "Please, my brother, modernize. Open up your country. Let women wear miniskirts, have discos, be modern." In response, the Saudi king replied, "You are not the Shah of France. You are in Iran. Your population is 90% Muslim. Please don't forget that." In fact, despite both countries being predominantly Muslim, each has a different and opposing Islamic sect as the religious majority. In short, the Saudis follow Wahhabism, an ultra-conservative sect of the Sunni faith, while Iranians are mostly Twelvers of the Shia faith. The divide between the Shia and the Sunni is largely based on who they believe is the true successor of Islam's prophet, Muhammad. Most of the world's Muslims identify as Sunni, and nearly half of the world's Shiites live in Iran. In 1979, Iran underwent a revolution that ousted the westernized US-backed Shah and instituted an Islamic republic led by a religious authority, Ayatollah Khomeini. The now anti-US Iran began openly condemning Saudi Arabia's religious authority and support for the US. In the late 80s, possibly spurred by Saudi Arabia and the US's significant backing of Iraq in the Iran-Iraq War, the Ayatollah made a number of inflammatory comments. After calling the Saudis a band of heretics, diplomatic relations between the two countries stalled. But by 2007, tensions had relaxed enough that the Iranian president visited Saudi Arabia as a friendly gesture. In 2011, there was an assassination attempt by Iranian nationals against the Saudi ambassador to the US, and at the same time, Iran supported Syrian President Bashar al-Assad against the US and Saudi forces during the Syrian civil war. This reignited Iran and Saudi Arabia's ideological rivalry. Since the 1960s, the two countries have been fighting for influence and control of the Middle East along religious and political lines. And currently, they are engaged in a proxy war in Yemen, exemplifying the Sunni-Shia East-West divide.
This is so important. When you see your president, our president, President of America, President Donald Trump, go right and speak directly in the Middle East to 50 Arab and Muslim nations and say exactly what he's been saying from his campaign trails, what he's saying about his agenda for the White House and where we want to go with America. I mean, it's amazing what's taking place. These are amazing days. And make sure you join us after the break, because we're going to go right back to the President Trump's speech as we're continuing from our previous program and hear these powerful words that are being spoken about how every country in this region has to rise up to its place to be able to fight this radical terrorism is taking place. Join us after the break. John and I are talking about what the president has done, the agenda he set. We can't cover the entire part of the speech we've already covered in the last program, but I think about, he said, you know, we got to unite on these values. We got to come together. You're going to need to support your own battle efforts, and we will get behind you, but you're going to have to pay for the weapons. You're going to have to, and they did. They did. They said they would get behind it. They signed an
arms deal, $110 billion arms deal, and committed to $400 billion investment into new jobs for Saudi Arabia and America. Right. But he also underscored the importance of not just contributing money, not just boots on the ground, but also committed to fighting this radical ideology, to drive it out of their country.
This is so important because he's in the middle of 50 Arab Muslim nation leaders. Yeah. He went straight into the heart of what many said was the issue or the problem because of the past leadership. The past president was saying, this is the problem, this is the problem. And they're going, no, you know, Prince Faisal right there saying, we've been wanting to support and get involved. And they wrote a check already. They're going to invest $400 billion into actually 500 plus billion when you add all they're putting together. And then he even said in his last speech, and President Trump, we're going to have more of a speech for his last speech, he said, that's part of his speech, he tells them right specifically, you got two futures, you got to make a choice. And he says, drive them out of the places. He says, I want you to drive them out. He says, a better future is only possible if your nation drives out the terrorists and the extremists. He's not talking to campaign people in
Right.
some political party somewhere. He's in the Middle East in Saudi Arabia with 50 Arab nations and Muslim nations together listening to him. He says, a better future is only possible for your nations if you drive out the terrorists and the extremists. And he says, drive them out. Drive them out of their places of worship. Drive them out of your communities. Drive them out of the Holy Land. Drive them out of this earth, is what he said.
Wow.
And they not only, they didn't applaud it, but they said, we want to put money, they invested $500+ billion behind that. Yes, we want to do that.
What's amazing what happens when leadership shows up and sets the agenda and says, this is a new day. You know, he also spoke this in front of this nation who actually had the majority of the hijackers of 9/11 were from Saudi Arabia. So to me, that just speaks of the fortitude, the strength of our president, and the commitment to fighting this radical Islam there and not making sure that it comes here.
Right, and you think some of the things we have in our own country that comes up, it's not all of America, but there could be
No.
elements in America that's against America, against
Absolutely.
things that most Americans stand for, and that's a huge tension. We explained that in the previous program. But we're going to go back to the President Trump's speech in Saudi Arabia, and he's talking right here and very specifically that we have to begin to deny the terrorist organizations control over the territory, populations, and their finances. They're going to work together in stopping the money going back and forth. As a matter of fact, let's join the president now. This is Saudi Arabia. Remember he's speaking to 50 Arab Muslim leader nations. Take a look.
Every country in the region has an absolute duty to ensure that terrorists find no sanctuary on their soil. As we deny terrorist organization control of territory and populations, we must also strip them of their access to funds. We must cut off the financial channels that let ISIS sell oil, let extremists pay their fighters, and help terrorists smuggle their reinforcements. I am proud to announce that the nations here today will be signing an agreement to prevent the financing of terrorism, called the Terrorist Financing Targeting Center.
That's so important.
Yes.
Talking about ending, because there's no money, you don't fund it.
Yeah, when you cut the money, you cut the source.
Remember, we did 6 days in Iraq when the Beck program, the Blaze Television had a reporter there. We had the northern Peshmerga was up there and trying to fight
Brave
off
soldiers
by themselves because Iraq's leaders wouldn't give them the money or the military weapons that was supposedly being sent over there, and they were funding their operation from the oil that they got from that area. And we're watching, we showed you on VFNtv, thanks to the Blaze Television, of their oil trucks going back and forth, and we never stopped. In other words, they knew what was going on. They didn't stop it. They were watching, and Peshmerga couldn't do anything until they got the okay from our administration, former administration. And now you're looking at, right here, President Trump is saying that we're going to put an end to this, but not just America. He's talking about us all together, 50
collectively, in agreement.
Yes. Matter of fact, take a look right now.
That means honestly confronting the crisis of Islamic extremism and the Islamicists and Islamic terror of all kinds. We must stop what they're doing to inspire, because they do nothing to inspire but kill. And we are having a very profound effect if you look at what's happened recently. And it means standing together against the murder of innocent Muslims, the oppression of women, the persecution of Jews, and the slaughter of Christians. Religious leaders must make this absolutely clear. Barbarism will deliver you no glory. Piety to evil will bring you no dignity. If you choose the path of terror, your life will be empty, your life will be brief, and your soul will be fully condemned. Heroes don't kill innocents, they save them.
Heroes don't kill innocents, they save them. That's so important because it's been so twisted for so long. But I think I love this, all of it, but this is what the president's saying. Your president, if you're in America, but also if you're for freedom and not in ending in terrorism in the world, He's saying religious leaders must make this absolutely clear that barbarianism will deliver you no glory. Piety to evil will bring you no dignity. And if you choose the path of terror, your life will be empty, your life will be brief, and your soul will be condemned. That's important.
That's truth.
It was important because of the false narrative that radical Islamic terrorists have been taught, is that if you die in the name of Islam, then you're going to go to heaven.
Is it a narrative, or is it really part of the religion? I mean, this is what the Quran actually says.
But he's openly speaking to Arab and Muslim nations. He's just saying that's not true. Your souls, you're not going to go to heaven. You're going to be condemned for killing folks like you've been doing. That's very big.
It's huge.
You know, how many Christians are just sitting back and not saying that reality? You know, and the president's going there and saying, listen.
In their house. In the house of Saud.
That's what I'm trying to say.
In their house.
And as a matter of fact, that Saudi Arabia has a vision. And they've shared this with the president. You saw the Prince Faisal talking about it, you know, the advisor to the Crown Prince. Faisal, and it's a vision for 2030. What will Saudi Arabia look like in 2030? Take a look.
Saudi Arabia's vision for 2030 is an important and encouraging statement of tolerance, respect, empowering women, and economic development.
Empowering women. You hear people saying about the president's speech, they're saying he didn't speak up for women, he didn't speak up for this. He spoke up for everything. I mean, he spoke up for, he stayed consistent for who he was. It's the same thing I've been hearing all along. As a matter of fact, I heard it years ago with him saying it, and it's happening. He's just, one British parliamentarian stood up and he said, President Trump will be the only politician that ever got in trouble for actually doing what he said he would do.
Yeah. And now what you're seeing in this dark contrast with the void of leadership that existed in this area, in the Middle East, in the previous administration. Now we have a new leader, a new president that's setting the course, setting the agenda, and these nations are responding to that nation and saying, hey, we're with you. Here's $510 billion to prove that we're with you.
And this is just the beginning.
And it's just the beginning.
Can you imagine how Kim Jong-un is feeling right now?
Terrified.
Terrified. I'm sure he's got cable.
Yeah.
He had only a house or cable in it. But you think about this, that, you know, things are shifting. You know, President Trump brought in so the reports are the greatest cabinet that's ever been put together in the history of cabinets coming together. So the reports are. And I think about Condoleezza Rice. She's the one that advised President Trump to take on Rex Tillerson as the Secretary of State. So all these people, it's not just, it's a team. I think about President Reagan. He said, you know, you can accomplish anything as long as you're willing to share the credit. And looks like you have a leader that's saying, listen, come on, Saudi Arabia, come on, 50 Arab nations and 50 Muslim nations, let's come together and let's end terrorism.
Amazing.
When they write you a $510 million check.
Our
previous president was giving away that money.
That's right.
$20 trillion in debt. And we got so many great things we're going to be showing you, because we have also his trip in Israel and what happened there and what's going to happen in Rome. And this is a new agenda. You remember 8 years ago there was an apology tour. Well, please forgive us for being Americans, right?
Yes. You know, I think the world is straightening up and taking notice that there's a different foreign agenda happening under this administration. And you're saying this cabinet is amazing. Rex Tillerson over Secretary of State, Wilbur Ross over Commerce. You have, you know, Governor Rick Perry over the energy.
Homeland Security.
General Kelly.
Yes.
These are professionals. These are people that the grown-ups. I mean, these people can handle what's happening. So he's not in it alone.
And who's the head security advisor? That's
Steve Bannon?
No. The military general.
McClaster, I think? McCaster?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
They speak highly of his integrity and his ability to tell the truth. It's amazing.
Yeah, and he actually wrote a book on integrity and what we did wrong in Vietnam in regards to those particular issues right there.
Yes, correct.
We are going with President Trump to Saudi Arabia. He's given his speech to 50 Arab and Muslim nation leaders and just laying it out there. And what he's about to say next on his speech is so important if you understand that women's rights and children's rights. And some people say, well, he didn't speak. He's already talked about it already. But this next part of his speech, he says, listen, you know, this means the promoting and aspirations and dreams of women and children. What are their dreams? Let's join the president now.
That means promoting the aspirations and dreams of all citizens who seek a better life, including women, children, and the followers of all faith.
You know, being an American, you may think, what's the big deal? It's a huge deal. It's a huge deal in Saudi Arabia because Saudi Arabia says women can't drive.
Yeah.
The women have to be covered. These different things. You saw the tensions earlier that we talked about in the program as it was explained. And so when you are a woman who is wanting to be heard and wanting to be more than just a piece of property or whatever.
Absolutely.
And the leader of America comes in and says, we think that the aspirations of these women and children is very, very important.
Yeah.
And they interviewed one of the princes, you know, the princes that said, you know, what do you have to say about this? Brett Baer did with Fox News. And he said, you know, we're not there yet, but today we're actually covering it on our own media. Is talking about these issues, women not driving and that type of thing. You just couldn't say anything at all.
And you can see this idea and what he's trying to promote with his own wife, the First Lady Melania, and his daughter Ivanka, not wearing any kind of headscarves when they were coming into the Middle East, and a stark contrast from what happened in previous administrations.
And at the same time, the pants that she was wearing is the very same pants that women in Saudi Arabia wear. And so in regards to the whole coverage, but that part of it, so some of the women spoke out and thought how much that meant that she was saying a statement for women, standing for women there. And that, you know, God is doing something in the earth. And if you're an oppressed person, you're so grateful when somebody's coming along and saying, your aspirations and your dreams matter. And here, President Trump said it right in the middle of the Middle East, who's struggling with these issues, and, you know, what are they going to do? What else did he,
He's getting ready to talk about how they must practice tolerance and respect for all people, for all ethnicity and their background. This is so important. This is a place traditionally has had very low tolerance for those that don't necessarily believe according to the way they believe.
So some of the ones that are saying that President Trump is intolerant, he's actually going to the people who are intolerant and saying, you need to be more tolerant.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go.
Watch.
We must practice tolerance and respect for each other once again, and make this region a place where every man and woman, no matter their faith or ethnicity, can enjoy a life of dignity and hope.
That is so important. I mean, if you're not oppressed and you don't know anybody that's oppressed and you don't know about the history of the Middle East and Saudi Arabia, you might not be thinking much. But if you are that person who's never been counted, that you actually have to have a witness in some nations to be able to prove that you were raped. If you don't have a witness with you, that you can't even get in an elevator without having, and you have a president. I mean, he's coming in, he's standing up for human rights.
That's right.
Values of the human race in the middle of people who are struggling with how do you give those rights to someone. I like what he does next.
Well, I think it's so important too when you think about this, that in the previous administration, this country has been marginalized. And so now Saudi Arabia is getting an opportunity to be players in the region because the United States is coming along. Well, now the president actually is able to promote his influence over the region, as you can see, by even talking about women's rights, human rights, and saying, listen, we want to work with you, but we want to see some change in some of your policies, in some of your ideologies, and let's do this together. But it's going to require all of us to do some changing to make this work.
I like what he says next because he's coming just nailing it and saying, listen, from Lebanon to Iraq to Yemen, he talks about the funds, the arms, the terrorism, and all the different proxy wars that are going on. I mean, he just nails it. And he's talking to some of the people who have been fighting the proxy wars. As a matter of fact, take a look.
From Lebanon to Iraq to Yemen, Iran funds arms and trains terrorists, militias, and other extremist groups that spread destruction and chaos across the region. For decades, Iran has fueled the fires of sectarian conflict and terror. It is a government that speaks openly of mass murder, vowing the destruction of Israel, death to America, and ruin for many leaders and nations in this very room. Among Iran's most tragic and destabilizing interventions, you've seen it in Syria. Bolstered by Iran, Assad has committed unspeakable crimes, and the United States has taken firm action in response to the use of banned chemical weapons by the Assad regime, launching 59 missiles at the Syrian airbase from where that murderous attack originated.
So you're looking at, by the way, the president's given that tone and the slowness of the speech so that can be interpreted for people that are listening to it. I mean, think about the difference of this. The previous president was supporting Iran, sending pallets of money over to, hundreds of millions of dollars, I believe, on pallets of
hundreds of millions,
and giving them access to, people say it's just for energy. Well, that's what North Korea did.
And now we're dealing with North Korea.
With a nuclear power. And the same one that negotiated the deal reportedly for President Bill Clinton in North Korea was the same one they got to cut the deal in Iran.
We would hire the same person, really?
But look, I mean, what he's saying, he said, listen, he says, Iran has been funding he's saying very specifically that from Lebanon to Iraq, Yemen, Iran funds, arms, and trains terrorists, militia, and other extremist groups that spread destruction and chaos across the region. For decades, Iran has fueled the fires of all this contentions and terror, and they're a state-sponsored terrorism. But for 8 years, they've been supporting our own leadership.
Absolutely.
Was supporting terror. Mm-hmm. I mean, right?
Well, the president's own advisor, Valerie Jarrett, was born in Iran. I mean,
she's an American, but her father was there, and she was born there. She was very friendly with the whole concept.
But Saudi Arabia.
Remember the Green Party?
Oh yes.
The Green Party, when they were having the spring uprising and Arab nations were getting free from the oppression. Yeah. Well, they wanted to do the same thing, so they did the same thing in their street, and they wrote a letter to President Barack Obama, the former president, and said, "Help us too."
It never happened.
It didn't happen. Instead, they helped the
those that were in power stay in power.
The Ayatollah, and just gave them. It's like what God has intervened. This is just like Haman. When you think about, remember Haman? He had this plot against the Jews, and he hated the Jews because some personal vendetta that he had because somebody didn't, think he was something, and so because the guy was a Jew that did that to him, he's going to hurt all the Jews, and so he builds this huge hangman's, noose, and they're going to kill all the Jews. And then all of a sudden, even though he built this huge apparatus, it turned on him. And he got exposed. And the very trap and tools and financing and strategy that they put together to kill the Jews got over that, and they're the ones that exercised that equipment, and he died on his own evil plots. He fell in his own hole that he dug. I mean, Proverbs says that. Listen, we got to go to break. But listen, we're going to continue with the president speaking, laying out policy now. If you want to know where our president stands, if you stay tuned to the last program, this program, and our future programs, as we cover his international tours as he's taken with these speeches, he's setting an agenda for the world. It's amazing. Join us after the break. We are joining President Donald Trump in the Middle East at Saudi Arabia as he's speaking to 50 Arab and Muslim nations. He is standing up. If anybody right now should say, we owe this man respect because he's walked in the midst literally of the swords.
Yes. And
stood up and said the very same thing he's been saying, standing up for women, standing up for the values of folks, standing up for the, over 90% of the victims of radical Islam, John, are Muslims, according to his speech. But what is he saying over here?
Well, although Iran was not a part of this speech, they weren't present, represented, he did address them. Yeah, he did address them. And he did say that they're going to have to be isolated. If they're not going to be a partner in peace, that we're going to have to work collectively as a global community, basically, to isolate them. Watch this.
Until the Iranian regime is willing to be a partner for peace, all nations of conscience must work together to isolate Iran, deny it. Funding for terrorism cannot do it. And pray for the day when the Iranian people have the just and righteous government they so richly deserve.
That's so powerful.
Wow.
You think about that. So you're looking at the, basically everybody around Iran is about to snuff out any support and cut off the fuel and cut off all the things that the previous president just opened up a floodgate of funds
wealth and prosperity.
Wealth and prosperity and doing business. People ran to do business with them to use that. Get that
Germany.
Yeah, Germany. And so now you're looking at, they're saying, as a matter of fact, he even says right here in this next part of his speech, he says, listen, will we be indifferent in the presence of evil? Will we just sit back? And a lot of people do that. A lot of people watch the world and watch life and watch TV, but they don't get involved in it. And it's like, he's saying, you're going to fight this thing. If you would have called our previous program, you're going to fight this thing. We're going to get behind you. Oh, we're going to give you some tools, but you're going to buy the tools from us. I'm going to love that.
We're not going to give it to you.
Yes, I love that. He said that's what he said he's going to do. As a matter of fact, join him. This is him speaking specifically about, talking to the 50 Arab and Muslim nations. Are you going to sit around and be indifferent, or are you going to do something about this opportunity? Take a look.
Will we be indifferent in the presence of evil? Will we protect our citizens from its violent ideology? Will we let its venom spread through our societies? Will we let it destroy the most holy sites on earth? I ask you to join me, to join together, to work together, and to fight together, because united, we will not fail. We cannot fail.
That's so important. You're looking at, he's saying, that's it. Join me in this vision. He cast the vision. He said, this is, everybody's got to man up and woman up and do their responsibility for driving out this radical element. And a lot of people have been letting it nest there's some no-go zones all over Europe, and they're letting that nest there instead of saying, we're not going to do that here anymore. And you look at this big turnaround taking place, and he's saying, are we going to sit complacently by and not do something, or are you going to join me and join us together to be able to fight this element? And the thing about it is, what you find out, what follows that? Well, $400 billion investment,
$510 billion investment,
where they're purchasing America's equipment to fight the battle themselves. And we heard, Prince Faisal talk about, they've been trying to do that for 8 years, but the previous president said, we don't want your help.
And why wasn't that not reported? I mean, so many things were marginalized.
It's dangerously brought us to a place that if it wasn't for God intervening, as you heard Lance Walnew talk about at the beginning of this program, God intervened with Cyrus to stop the destruction that was coming our way. I mean, mercy just came. And so we have to respond and realize these Sunni Muslims are saying, listen, and I think about the king of Jordan too.
Abdullah?
Yeah, he's saying from the beginning, he was at the prayer meeting in Washington, D.C., saying, we want to work with you to be able to stop this.
Because he's taken on so many of the refugees, his country can't even support him anymore.
Yes. And the president said, I'm going to go there, and we heard in the early part of his speech, or the early part of this program, he said, they got lots of money, we're going to go there, we're going to take their money to do it, and they're going to pay for it. And that's exactly what's happening. You have a president that had a vision for bringing safety, security, and finance into this whole security apparatus, and for jobs as well. He had a vision for it, but how many people say they have a vision for it and they don't bring it up? I mean, they're writing the check. He's going exactly to where he says he's going to go. He's casting vision, and they wrote 510, the beginning of I'm sure,
I think two things American people are still beginning to see with this president. They haven't seen it already. One, they're seeing that his business skills come into play on the global scene, because he's making all these deals that are so important. And a lot of times you have administrators that are not cutting the right deals. They're playing these political...
That's not their gift.
Yeah, they're playing political games, right? And the second thing you're seeing is a president who backs up his word. He's doing what he said he was going to do. It's a refreshing time. It really is an encouraging time in America.
I hate to say that, but it's very unusual for a national political figure to stick to their original script. And although he is pragmatic in what he's doing, which you have to be pragmatic because you're dealing with all these moving elements and parts. But this is, so now you know, these last two programs, you got to really hear firsthand what was happening in Saudi Arabia, what our president said on the international scale, 50 Arab and Muslim nations coming together who backed it up with financial support. And so you know firsthand, you need to share this with your friends so they actually know what's going on and don't get the secular bent on it.
That's right.
But listen, our next program, we're going to be talking about Israel. As President Trump goes to Jerusalem. He is close friends with Bibi, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister, the President. He was shown over 5,000-year-old items that's in the Prime Minister's house. Well, a tour through the Prime Minister's house, you'll see he was given a Bible. He's the first president to pray at the Western Wall. In Jerusalem. I mean, we're about to go to, I want to pray.
He's also the first president who made Israel part of his very first foreign trip. First president ever to do that. So a lot of firsts.
So this is so exciting. Make sure you catch our next program. We're spending this whole week on President Trump's international tour, and as he's setting vision for the new economy, the new safety, and the new security. I want to pray with you before we go. Father God, Lord, I thank you for our audience. I just pray encouragement over them and blessings over them. For those that need healing right now, Father God, I just speak healing over their bodies, maybe over their mind, over their eyes, over their joints. I speak for those that are lonely, Lord God, that you would just send somebody in their life to be able to encourage them, Lord God, and your Spirit would go to encourage them, that they wouldn't have to be alone anymore, Father God. And I thank you that we're together every day on television as we're talking to them. So we're not alone, we're together, Father God, every day. And by your grace, we'll continue to be here, God. We pray a blessing over our audience. In Jesus' name, God bless. Thank you for watching VFNtv. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up. Also, if you want to see more videos like this, subscribe.
You know, a lot of people want to abide with the Lord, but they just don't have a plan to do it. You can request that plan today at iabide.org.
Don't forget you can join us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Download our app and sign up for our newsletter, The Torch, at VFNtv.com.